Did you ever meet a man who smiles at cameras and lies to mirrors? Tonight, a tech billionaire thought he'd engineered the perfect tragedy. A rain-slick highway, a car that stops listening, a fortune that moves when a heart does not. But there's one variable he didn't code for: her father. A retired FBI legend sits in the dark, watching a feed he shouldn't have, tracing money that it shouldn't exist, and waiting for a confession no one expects. His daughter, 7 months pregnant, was supposed to disappear into the statistics. Instead, she wakes, and the moment her eyes open, the clock starts. 3 missing months, a dead first wife, a mistress with a secret, and a cabin where accidents like to happen twice. Who hacked the car? Who signed the papers? And what happens when a grieving father turns the trap back on the hunter? Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, you'll hear the lie that brings an empire down and the whisper that saves a life. If you love tight, twisty thrillers, tap. Like to keep this story visible? Comment your wildest theory before the reveal, share with a friend who loves crime dramas, and subscribe so you don't miss the moment the billionaire realizes he's not the smartest person in the room. The hospital monitor beeped in steady rhythm, 3:17 in the morning. Mount Sinai's private ICU floor was quiet except for the mechanical breathing of ventilators and the soft footsteps of night nurses making rounds. Elena Hart lay motionless in bed, 7 months pregnant, according to her chart, unconscious for 8 weeks now. The breathing tube down her throat rose and fell with artificial regularity. Her belly, once round with life, was flat now, empty. Adrien Cross stood over his wife's bed, perfectly dressed despite the hour. His $5,000 suit didn't have a single wrinkle. His Italian leather shoes gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He looked like a man who'd stepped out of a boardroom, not someone keeping vigil at his pregnant wife's bedside. He was alone. Adrien leaned close to Elena's ear and whispered, "I'm sorry it came to this, Elena, but you left me no choice." His hand moved toward the ventilator controls. His fingers hovered over the oxygen flow dial. The door opened. Thomas Hart entered carrying 2 cups of terrible hospital coffee. Gray hair, steel eyes, moving with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent 30 years hunting dangerous men for the FBI. He looked at Adrien, then at Adrien's hand near the ventilator. "Couldn't sleep either?" Thomas asked. Adrien jerked back, composing himself in half a heartbeat. "Tom, no, I was just talking to her. They say coma patients can sometimes hear." Thomas studied his son-in-law with the gaze of a man who'd interrogated terrorists. "What were you saying?" Adrien's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That I love her, that I need her to fight." Thomas set down the coffee and settled into the chair opposite Adrien's. He didn't blink, didn't look away. "You look exhausted, son. Why don't you head home? Get some real sleep. I'll stay with her." "I don't mind staying," Adrien said. "I insist." Not a suggestion, an order. Adrien hesitated, trapped. If he refused, it looked suspicious. If he left, he couldn't finish what he'd started. "Just for a few hours," Adrien said carefully. "Call me if anything changes." "Of course." Adrien gathered his coat and paused at the door. He looked back at Elena, calculating something behind his eyes. Thomas didn't blink, didn't move. Adrien left. The moment the door closed, Thomas pulled out his iPhone. He opened an app labeled Home Security, but the screen showed multiple camera angles of a luxury penthouse. Adrien's penthouse. Thomas texted someone. He was about to pull the plug, moving to phase 2, get the lawyers ready. The response came immediately. "Copy that. Kate." Thomas looked at his daughter through the glass partition. His jaw tightened. "I've got you, baby girl," he whispered. He doesn't know what's coming. 72 hours earlier, Thomas Hart's home office in Connecticut looked nothing like a retired guy's study. It was a war room. Multiple monitors showed live feeds from hidden cameras in Adrien's penthouse. Financial spreadsheets filled another screen, transactions highlighted in red. A timeline board covered one wall, photos connected by red string like something from a crime thriller. A photo of Rebecca Ford had "deceased suspicious" stamped across it. A fire marshal's report was marked "Case closed, arson suspected." Thomas was on a video call with Kate Russell, 42 years old, former NYPD detective turned private investigator. Her home office behind her looked equally professional. "Tom, Jake finished the deep dive on Rebecca's house fire, Kate said. You were right, it wasn't electrical failure. She shared her screen, showing fire investigation photos. Fire marshal noted accelerant patterns consistent with professional arson. But the case got buried when Neuralink Systems donated $2 million to the fire department's Equipment Modernization Fund 3 weeks later. Adrien bought his way out, Thomas said, just like he's buying his way into Elena's trust fund. Kate pulled up financial documents. Look at this. Neuralink is hemorrhaging cash. $180 million in debt, due in 6 months. But Elena's trust unlocks in 8 weeks. $50 million, all to her. And if she dies, Thomas asked, though he already knew the answer. Community property state. He inherits everything. And if she's incapacitated? He has medical power of attorney, controls it all. Thomas stood and paced, the weight of what he knew pressed down on him. Elena called me 2 days ago, said she found her signature forged on corporate loan documents. She's smart. She's figuring it out. Then she's in danger, Kate said. That's why I told her to come here tonight. Once she's in this house, I can protect her while we finish building the case. Thomas's phone rang. Unknown number. Morrison, he answered, using his old FBI alias. A voice, electronically distorted, said, Stop digging into Adrien Cross. This is your only warning. Who is this? Click. Deadline. Kate saw his expression change. What happened? He knows I'm investigating. Tom, we need to pull her out now. With what evidence? Everything we have is circumstantial. No district attorney will prosecute. We need him to make a move, and we need to catch him red-handed. You're using your daughter as bait. I'm trusting that she's as smart as I trained her to be, and I'm going to be right there when he tries something. Kate looked reluctant. What do you need? Jake, full surveillance package. I want Adrien's phone cloned, his car tracked, and access to Elena's Tesla remotely. If this goes sideways, it won't. I didn't spend 30 years at the bureau to lose my daughter to some tech bro sociopath. At that same moment, across town in Adrien's penthouse, the tech billionaire paced by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. I don't care what you have to do, Marcus, Adrien said into his phone. Find me a way to access that trust fund early. Yes, I'm aware of the conditions. What if she's incapacitated? Brain injury? Permanent guardian needed? How long would that take? 6 months minimum? That's too long. The creditors are circling. Vanessa Lee emerged from the bedroom, late 20s, beautiful, dressed in one of Adrien's shirts, his VP of marketing, and clearly more than that. Still awake? She asked. Adrien waved her off and continued his call. Find me a faster way. There has to be a loophole. He hung up. Trouble in paradise? Vanessa asked. The board is threatening a vote of no confidence. If I don't stabilize the company's finances by Q2, I'm out. What about Elena's trust? Adrien's voice went cold. She's not cooperating. Meaning? Meaning she's asking questions. Her father's poisoning her against me. Vanessa poured herself wine. So what's the plan? Divorce? She'd get half of nothing. Rebecca's insurance payout kept me afloat for 3 years. Beat. Vanessa processed what he'd just implied. Rebecca's death was an accident, she said carefully. Adrien looked at her. Was it? Long silence. She should have been horrified. Instead, she was calculating. If something happened to Elena, Vanessa said slowly, you'd be a widower with a tragic backstory. Very sympathetic. Good for the company image. And her father? A grieving grandfather who lost his daughter and grandson in a horrible accident. Who's going to suspect the heartbroken husband? Adrien studied her. This was why he'd chosen her. She thought like him. I need to make a call, he said. He stepped onto the balcony and dialed a number. It's me. I have another job for you. The same kind as last time. No, it needs to look like an accident. Tesla Model S. She'll be driving it tonight. Can you remote access the system? Good. I'll send you the route. He hung up and stared at the city lights. Vanessa watched him through the glass, a smile playing at her lips. She was complicit, and she liked it. Highway 7 in Connecticut, 8:47 that evening. Rain hammered Elena's Tesla Model S, wipers on high. Her phone was mounted on the dash. She was on a call with Thomas. Dad, it's worse than I thought. The forged signatures are on every loans, contracts, even my personal account strips drained. Over $2 million gone. How far out are you? Thomas asked. Maybe 20 minutes. I have all the bank statements and wait. The dashboard flickered, went black for a second, came back on. That's weird. What? The dashboard just glitched, and my phone's acting strange. Her phone screen went black. Dead. Dad? Dad! She reached for the phone. It was completely powered off. What the hell? She tried to restart it. Nothing. Then the accelerator slammed down on its own. Elena's foot wasn't on the pedal. The car lurched forward. No! She hit the brake. Nothing happened. The pedal went to the floor. The speedometer climbed. 55, 65, 75. She yanked the wheel. It was locked. It wouldn't turn. Emergency brake. Disabled. Help! Somebody help me! The highway barrier loomed ahead, getting closer. 80, 85, 90 miles per hour. She braced herself, covered her pregnant belly with both arms. Impact. In his study, Thomas heard Elena say, "That's weird," and then the line went dead. He immediately opened his laptop and pulled up the Find My iPhone app. Elena's location pin showed Highway 7, northbound, moving fast. Very fast. Speed indicated 88 miles per hour, 92, 95. Thomas's blood ran cold. No, 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 no. He grabbed his car keys, running for the door while dialing 911. This is Thomas Hart, FBI retired, badge number 4473219. My daughter's vehicle has been remotely hijacked, Route 7 northbound near mile marker 47. I need state troopers, now. Sir, how do you know it's been hijacked? Because I'm watching her speed climb, and she's not in control. Get units there now. He was in his car, engine roaring to life. He watched the Find My iPhone screen. Elena's pin suddenly stopped moving. Thomas's world stopped with it. Ellie, he whispered. The next 90 minutes blurred together. Fire trucks, ambulances. Elena's Tesla wrapped around a concrete barrier like a crushed aluminum can. Paramedics shouted. Female, 32 years old, approximately 30 weeks pregnant, massive trauma. Thomas arrived and nearly collapsed seeing the wreckage. At the hospital, the trauma team raced against time. Dr. Carter shouted orders. She's coding, charging paddles to 200, clear. Emergency C-section, surgeons working frantically. A baby was pulled out, tiny, premature, not breathing. The NICU team performed infant resuscitation. Then a weak cry, barely audible but alive. Elena's monitors flatlined. They shocked her back. Adrien arrived in a perfect suit, his grief face practiced and ready for the cameras outside. At midnight, Dr. Carter emerged from surgery, her scrubs blood-stained. Mr. Hart, your daughter is in critical condition. We had to perform an emergency C-section. The baby, a boy, is alive but extremely premature. The next 72 hours are critical for both of them. Can I see her? Thomas asked. She's in a medically induced coma. The head trauma was severe. We won't know the extent of brain damage until, if, she wakes up. You said if. Dr. Carter's voice was gentle. Mr. Hart, I have to be realistic. The impact, the blood loss, the oxygen deprivation. Even if she survives, she may never fully recover. Thomas sat down hard, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. Adrien appeared, followed by a camera crew. A reporter shouted, Mr. Cross, can you comment on your wife's condition? Adrien turned to the cameras. We're just praying right now. Elena is the strongest person I know. If anyone can fight through this, it's her. He turned off the performance and walked to Thomas. Tom, I'm so sorry. If there's anything you need. Thomas looked up at him and studied his face. Where were you when she crashed? Adrien answered carefully. At home. Working? Why? She was coming to see me. Did you know that? She mentioned she wanted to visit you. I encouraged it. You two are close. Yeah, we are. Long beat, Adrien couldn't read Thomas's expression. I should go see my son, Adrien said. He walked away. The moment he was gone, Thomas pulled out his phone and texted Kate. He did this. I need proof. Pull the Tesla's black box data. Now. Day 3, 4:23 in the morning. Alarm sounded in the NICU. Nurses rushed. Thomas jerked awake in the chair beside the incubator. Code blue, NICU base 7. The baby, Daniel according to the nameplate, his tiny chest stopped moving. Starting compressions, a doctor called out. Thomas watched, helpless, as they tried to save his grandson. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, the doctor spoke quietly. Time of death, 4:31 a.m. The machines went silent. Thomas stood and walked to the incubator. He looked down at the impossibly small body. "I'm sorry, bud," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you." 30 minutes later, Adrien arrived carrying a Starbucks cup. "He died an hour ago," Thomas said. "Where were you?" "I was getting coffee." "I didn't know he was in distress." "Your son died and you were getting coffee." Adrien got defensive. "I haven't slept in 3 days, Tom. I needed caffeine. I'm not a monster." "Aren't you?" "What the hell does that mean?" "Elena was coming to me with evidence that you forged her signature. She crashed the same night. Your first wife died under suspicious circumstances. And now your son is dead and you're drinking a latte." Adrien's voice went cold. "Grief makes people say crazy things. I'll forgive that, but be careful, Tom. You're making accusations you can't prove." Yet, Elena's injuries are tragic, but they were an accident. The police report says she was driving too fast in dangerous conditions. That's it. No conspiracy, no murder plot, just a terrible accident. Teslas keep logs of everything, including remote access. For just a second, Adrien's mask slipped. Fear flickered across his face. Then it was gone. "Elena is my wife. That baby was my son. If you keep spreading these lies, I'll get a restraining order. You won't be allowed anywhere near her." "Try it." They stared at each other. A silent declaration of war. Adrien walked away. Thomas returned to the NICU and sat beside the now empty incubator. He pulled out his phone and recorded a voice memo. Adrien Cross, Day 3. He showed no emotion when told his son died, deflected with attack, threatened legal action when I mentioned Tesla logs. He's guilty, and I'm going to prove it. He looked through the glass at Elena's ICU room. "He thinks he's won," Thomas whispered. "He has no idea what's coming." Week 8, dawn. Thomas had barely left the hospital, sleeping in chairs, living on terrible coffee. He was reviewing files on his laptop when the monitors changed rhythm. He looked up. Elena's eyes were moving beneath her lids. "Lena, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered, opened slightly, confused, scared. Thomas hit the call button. "Nurse, she's waking up!" The medical team rushed in. Dr. Carter took charge. "Elena, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand." Elena's fingers moved, a weak squeeze. "Good, you're in the hospital. You were in an accident. You're safe." Elena's eyes focused on Thomas. Recognition flooded her face. She tried to break, but her throat was too dry from the breathing tube. "It's okay, baby, don't try to talk yet." But Elena's hand moved slowly, desperately, to her stomach. Flat, empty. Her eyes widened in horror. Dr. Carter spoke gently. "Elena, you were pregnant. We had to perform an emergency C-section to save your life. You had a son, but I'm so sorry. He was too premature. He only lived 3 days." The sound Elena made wasn't quite a scream, more like a wounded animal. Thomas gripped her hand as she thrashed weakly. Sedatives were already being administered. "No, no, 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 my baby," Elena rasped. "I'm so sorry, Ellie. I'm so sorry." She was sobbing, unable to form words. As the sedatives took effect, she looked at Thomas with heartbreaking clarity. "Adrien," she barely whispered. Thomas hesitated. Did she remember? Did she know? "Rest now. We'll talk when you're stronger." Her eyes closed, but tears kept sliding down her face, even in sleep. Week 9. Dr. Carter met with Thomas and Elena in a private consultation room. Elena sat in a wheelchair, still weak but alert. "Elena, I need to ask you some questions. Can you tell me your full name?" "Elena Marie Hart." "Good. What year is it?" 2024, November. Right? "Correct. What's your profession?" I was a detective, NYPD. Now I run security consulting." Excellent. Now, do you remember the accident? Elena's face clouded. I was driving, it was raining, something was wrong with the car. I couldn't control it. Do you remember where you were going? To my dad's house. I was bringing him something. Her face scrunched in frustration. Why can't I remember what? What's the last clear memory you have before the drive? Elena thought hard. I was at work, running a security audit for some tech company. Wait, what month did you say this is? November 14th. Elena grew distressed. That's impossible. The last thing I remember is August. I was planning to come visit you for your birthday, Dad. That was August 12th. My birthday, yeah. So where's September? Where's October? Why can't I remember 3 months? Dr. Carter looked at Thomas. Can I speak with you outside? In the hallway, Dr. Carter explained. She has retrograde amnesia, specifically for the 3 months preceding the trauma. It's not uncommon with severe head injuries. Will the memories come back? Thomas asked. Possibly, but there's no guarantee. Some patients recover their memories gradually over weeks or months. Others never do. The brain is unpredictable. Thomas calculated silently. 3 months. Doctor, what was happening 3 months ago? I don't know. Why? Thomas spoke carefully. Because 3 months ago, my daughter discovered her husband was embezzling from her. 3 months ago, she decided to leave him. And 3 months ago, she started gathering evidence. Are you saying the accident wasn't accidental? I'm saying she doesn't remember Adrien's crimes. She doesn't remember planning to divorce him. She might not even remember being unhappy with him. Long silence. What are you going to tell her? The truth, but I need to do it carefully. If Adrien finds out she's starting to remember, she's in danger. That night, Thomas was alone with Elena in her room. He'd checked. No visitors, no cameras except the security ones he'd already hacked. Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on? I need you to listen carefully, and I need you to trust me. Always. He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of her Tesla wrapped around the barrier. Elena whispered, Jesus. The police report says you were driving recklessly in a storm, but you're a trained professional. You know better. I remember trying to brake. The pedal went to the floor. The steering locked. I thought I was going insane. You weren't. He swiped to another image. Tesla diagnostic data. The car was remotely hijacked. Someone sent a command that disabled your controls and forced acceleration. Elena stared at the screen. Her training kicked in. She was reading the data. This command came from an authenticated administrative account belonging to Neuralink Systems. What's Neuralink? Elena stopped. Wait, why do I know that name? Because in the months you don't remember, you married the CEO. Silence. Elena just stared at him. I'm married? To Adrien Cross, 18 months ago. Elena shook her head. No, I would remember getting married. I would remember. You're 7 weeks out from a traumatic brain injury. The 3 months you lost, that's when you figured out Adrien was stealing from you. That's when you decided to leave him. And the night you crashed, you were bringing me evidence. Elena whispered, he tried to kill me. Yes. And our baby, Daniel, I can't prove intent on Daniel's death. But yes, I believe Adrien's actions caused it. Elena closed her eyes, taking it all in. Why are you telling me this now? Because he's going to visit you tomorrow. He's going to play the devoted husband. And you can't let him know you suspect anything. You want me to lie to him? I want you to survive until I can prove what he did. Right now, it's your word against his. He's a billionaire with lawyers. We need hard evidence. Elena's cop brain engaged. The Tesla data, circumstantial. His lawyers will say someone else at his company had access. His first wife. You mentioned suspicious circumstances. House fire. Arson suspected, but never proven. He donated $2 million to the fire department. Case went cold. So he's done this before. Yes, which means he'll do it again if he thinks you're a threat. Elena nodded slowly, making the choice. What's the plan? You pretend you don't remember him. Amnesia gives you plausible deniability. Act confused, vulnerable. Let him think you're easy to control. And meanwhile, Meanwhile, Kate and I build the case. We're tracking his finances, his communications, everything. We'll get him, Ellie, but you have to stay safe until we do. How long? However long it takes. She looked at her father, the man who taught her to fight, to think, to survive. Okay, let's do this. The next day, Adrien entered Elena's room with flowers and a designer suit. His concern was perfectly calculated. Kate Russell was there too, posing as a hospital social worker. A hidden body camera recorded everything. Elena, oh God, Elena. Adrien took her hand. I've been so worried. Elena looked at him like he was a stranger, because to her, he was. I'm sorry, do I know you? She said carefully. Adrien, as he flicked to Thomas, then back to Elena. It's me, Adrien, your husband. I'm married to you? Adrien turned to Dr. Carter. The amnesia, how severe is it? She's lost approximately 3 months. Everything before August is intact. Adrien was calculating. So she doesn't remember the wedding? The wedding was in April of last year, so yes, she remembers that. But recent events, the pregnancy, the circumstances around the accident, those are gone. Adrien's visible relief was subtle, but Thomas caught it. He turned to Elena. It's okay, we'll get through this together. He pulled out his phone. Look, here's us at our wedding. He showed her photos. Elena studied them. Herself in a wedding dress standing next to this man, smiling. But Thomas had taught her to read micro-expressions. In every photo, her smile didn't reach her eyes. We look happy, Elena said. We are happy. Can you tell me about us? How we met? You were consulting on security for my company. You found vulnerabilities no one else caught. I was impressed, asked you to dinner. We fell in love. It sounded rehearsed, because it was. And the baby? Adrien's pause was half a second too long. A beautiful surprise. We were both thrilled. Were you there when he died? I was there for all of it. Held his hand, told him how much I loved him. Thomas's jaw tightened. That was a lie. Adrien had arrived an hour after Daniel died. But Elena didn't know that. She teared up. I know this is overwhelming, Adrien said, but I'm here for you, whatever you need. I just need time to process all of this. Of course, no pressure. He kissed her forehead. I love you, Elena. I love you too, Elena said automatically, but the words sounded hollow in her mouth. After Adrien left, Kate reviewed the body camera footage with Thomas in the hospital cafeteria. He's good, I'll give him that. Too good. He's playing a character. How's Elena holding up? She's a fighter, but this is hard on her. Grieving a child, recovering from trauma, and now playing defense against a man who tried to kill her. We got something from Jake. Adrien's been making large cash withdrawals. 50,000 here, 30,000 there. Untraceable. Paying someone. That's what we think. Also found something else. He's having an affair. Kate showed him photos from a private investigator's surveillance. Adrien with a beautiful young woman, clearly intimate. Who is she? Vanessa Lee, VP of Marketing at Neuralink. They've been together at least 8 months while Elena was pregnant. Does Elena know? If she did, she doesn't remember. Save those photos. We might need them. At Neuralink Systems, Vanessa sat in Adrien's office. She'd seen the news. The wife had woken up from her coma. So she's alive, Vanessa said. Adrien's voice was tight on the phone. Yes, that's wonderful news. Beat. For you. Don't start. I'm just saying, this complicates things. She doesn't remember the last 3 months. Doesn't remember finding out about the fraud. Doesn't even remember being unhappy. And us? There is no us right now. My wife just woke from a coma. Vanessa's voice went cold. Your wife who was supposed to die so we could be together. Keep your voice down. What's the plan, Adrien? Wait another 5 years like you did with Rebecca? I said I'd handle it. Like you handled the car accident? She survived. Adrien's voice turned dangerous. Barely, and with permanent memory loss. That's almost better than dead. She can't testify to what she doesn't remember. Unless the memories come back. They won't. You don't know that. Silence. Because she was right. I invested 2 years in this relationship, Adrien. I turned down offers from Google, from Meta. I stayed because you promised, and I keep my promises. But you need to be patient. I'm done being patient. Either you fix this, or I will. What does that mean? Vanessa stood to leave. It means sometimes accidents happen twice. She walked out. Adrien stared after her, realizing he had created a monster. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Elena was in physical therapy, relearning to walk without assistance. Thomas watched from the doorway. Kate approached and showed him something on her phone. More surveillance of Vanessa. Vanessa just left Neuralink headquarters, heading to a gun range in Paramus. She has a carry permit? Applied for one last month, approved 2 weeks ago. Why does a marketing executive need a gun? Same reason she's been taking private investigator courses online. She's learning how to cover her tracks. She's planning something. Should we warn Elena? Not yet. I don't want to scare her, but put a detail on Vanessa. 24/7 surveillance. Week 10, Adrien arrived with a town car to take Elena home. Elena clutched Thomas's hand. I don't want to go with him, she whispered. Thomas kept his voice quiet. I know, but if you refuse, it looks suspicious. Your apartment was sublet. Legally, you live with him now, but I'll be close, I promise. What if something happens? Code word is Daniel. Text me that name, I'm there in 15 minutes. Adrien appeared in the doorway. Ready to come home? Elena forced a smile. Yes. The penthouse was 5,000 square feet of glass walls and minimalist furniture, sterile as an operating room. I know it's overwhelming, Adrien said. Take your time getting reacquainted. It's beautiful. But Elena's eyes said it was a prison. I'll show you to our room. Actually, would you mind if I took the guest room, just until I feel more comfortable? Adrien's jaw tightened, but he couldn't refuse without looking controlling. Of course, whatever you need. He showed her to a smaller room, still luxurious but impersonal. I have some work calls. Why don't you rest? I'll order dinner. The moment he was gone, Elena locked the door. She sat on the bed, breathing hard. She pulled out her phone and texted Thomas. I'm here. I'm okay. For now. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She got up for water around 2 in the morning. She passed Adrien's office. The door was slightly open, light on. She heard his voice, tense and angry. I don't care how you do it, just make the problem go away. No, her father is watching too closely. It has to look natural. Maybe another accident? Something no one could trace? How much? Fine. Do it. Elena's heart stopped. She started backing away. The floor creaked. Adrien's voice stopped. I'll call you back. Footsteps approached. Elena rushed to the kitchen, turned on the tap, pretended she'd just arrived. Adrien appeared in the doorway watching her. Couldn't sleep? Elena forced normalcy into her voice. No, nightmares about the crash. Hmm? He studied her. How long have you been up? Just now. Why? Just wondering. Long, terrible silence. Come back to bed, Adrien said. I'm in the guest room, remember? Right, of course. But he didn't move. You know, Elena, I've been very patient, very understanding, but eventually we'll need to move forward, be a real couple again. I know, I just need time. How much time? I don't know. Adrien stepped closer. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you're avoiding me. I'm not. Are you sure? Because if someone was telling you things about me planting doubts, no one's telling me anything. Your father, for instance. Elena got defensive. My father's been nothing but supportive. Your father never liked me. You know that, right? Even before the accident. He's protective. That's different. Is it? Or is he using your amnesia to rewrite history? Elena said nothing. What could she say? I'm just saying, be careful who you trust. Even family has agendas. He walked away, leaving Elena shaking. She waited until she heard his bedroom door close. Then she texted Thomas one word. Daniel. The next morning, Thomas showed up at the penthouse at 7, using the code Elena had sent. He found her in the guest room, a packed bag ready. You okay? He knows I overheard something. He's suspicious. Then we pull you out now. And then what? You said we don't have enough evidence. Your safety is more important. We're so close, Dad. If I run now, he lawyers up and we lose our chance. Ellie, you taught me to finish the job. Let's finish this. Before Thomas could argue, Adrien emerged. Tom, didn't know you were coming. Elena texted, said she wasn't feeling well. Adrien looked at Elena with an edge in his voice. You didn't mention that to me. I didn't want to wake you. Tension crackled in the air. Actually, Tom, your timing is perfect. I was going to suggest Elena and I take a trip this weekend. The lake house upstate, fresh air, nature, help her recovery. Lake house, well? We bought it last year. Beautiful property. Very secluded. That last word hung in the air like a threat. Maybe I should come too. This is about reconnecting as a couple. No offense, but three's a crowd. Elena met her father's eyes. Dad, I'll be fine. Thomas read her eyes. She was giving him permission. You sure? I'm sure. Adrien smiled. Great, we'll leave Friday. After Adrien left for work, Thomas grabbed Elena's arm. You're not seriously going? Isolated location, no witnesses. If he's going to make a move, it'll be there, and we'll be ready. This is insane, Mate. This is the job. Wire me. Follow at a distance. Let's end this. Thomas was reluctant. Kate's going to kill me. Kate trained me. She'll understand. At Thomas's house, the war room was in overdrive. You're using your daughter as bait in a serial killer's trap, Kate said. She volunteered. She's traumatized, grieving, and has a brain injury. She's also a decorated detective who knows what she's doing. Jake spoke up. For what it's worth, I can have her fully wired. Audio, GPS tracker, even a panic button that'll alert us instantly. And what if he finds the wire, Kate asked. Then Thomas is 500 yards away with state troopers on speed dial. Kate looked at Thomas. If something happens to her, it won't. I'll die before I let him hurt her again. That's what I'm afraid of. Friday evening arrived too quickly. The drive upstate took 3 hours, and with every mile, Elena felt the weight of what she was about to do pressing down on her chest. Adrien's Range Rover hummed along the highway, classical music playing softly through the speakers. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually on the center console. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple taking a peaceful weekend trip to recover from trauma. But Elena's hands were clenched in her lap, hidden beneath her jacket. The tiny microphone was embedded in her necklace, so small she could barely feel it. The GPS tracker was sewn into the lining of her jacket, and her phone, modified by Jake, would continue transmitting even if Adrien tried to disable it. She was wired, tracked, and terrified. You're quiet, Adrien said, glancing at her. Elena forced herself to relax her shoulders. Just tired and nervous, I guess. Nervous about what? About being so isolated. What if I have a medical emergency? What if my memories come back and it's overwhelming? Adrien's smile was practiced and warm. That's why we're doing this, sweetheart. To help you heal. And I'll be right there with you. You're safe with me. The lie was so smooth, so believable, that for a moment Elena almost forgot he'd tried to kill her. This was what made Adrien dangerous. He could sell any story, play any role, and make you believe every word. She turned to look out the window at the darkening forest. How much farther? About 20 minutes. 20 minutes until they'd be completely alone. 20 minutes until her father and his team would be the only thing standing between her and whatever Adrien had planned. She touched the necklace briefly, a gesture that could pass as nervousness, but was actually her checking that the microphone was still in place. The lake house appeared around a bend in the road like something from a luxury magazine. An A-frame cabin with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a pristine lake. The water caught the last rays of sunset, turning it into liquid gold. Dense forests surrounded the property on 3 sides. It was breathtakingly beautiful and perfectly isolated. Here we are, Adrien said, pulling into the gravel driveway. Our little piece of paradise. Elena stepped out of the car, and the silence hit her immediately. No traffic sounds, no neighbors, no sirens or horns or the constant hum of the city. Just wind in the trees and water lapping at the shore. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, according to Kate's research. Perfect place for murder, Elena thought. then pushed the thought away. She had to stay focused. Adrien carried their bags inside. Elena lingered outside, pretending to admire the view. She whispered to the microphone hidden in her necklace. "Dad, I'm here." Half a mile down the only access road, hidden in a grove of trees, Thomas sat in the surveillance van with Kate and Jake. Multiple monitors showed Elena's GPS location, audio levels from the microphone, and satellite imagery of the lakehouse. Thomas pressed the button on his headset. "Copy that. We've got you. Stay sharp." Kate was checking the state trooper response time. "Nearest unit is 12 minutes out. I've got them on standby, but they won't move without probable cause." "They'll get their probable cause," Thomas said grimly. "He's going to confess. I can feel it." Jake was monitoring the audio feed, adjusting levels. "Signal strong. Battery life is good for 48 hours. If anything happens to the necklace, we've still got the backup mic in her jacket lining." Thomas stared at the screen showing his daughter's location, a small blue dot on the satellite map. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to go get her right now, to end this insanity before Adrien could hurt her again. But Kate put a hand on his shoulder. "She knows what she's doing, Tom. We trained her for this." "I trained her to catch bad guys," Thomas said quietly, "not to be bait for one." Inside the cabin, Adrien was unpacking groceries in the kitchen. The interior was as stunning as the exterior. Exposed beam ceilings, a stone fireplace that dominated one wall, leather furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. But Elena noticed other things. The doors had deadbolts that required keys on both sides. The windows had locks that needed keys to open. Fire code violation, her detective brain noted. Also a trap. "Why do the windows lock like that?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Adrien was opening a bottle of wine. "Security. This place is remote. We had some break-ins a few years ago, so I upgraded all the locks. But what if there's a fire? We'd be trapped. That's why there's a fire extinguisher in every room. And the keys are all in the same place, in the kitchen drawer." He gestured vaguely. "Come have some wine. It'll help you relax." Elena accepted the glass but barely sipped it. She needed to stay sharp. Adrien started preparing dinner, moving around the kitchen with practiced ease. "You know, I really think this is going to be good for us. No distractions. No father hovering over you, filling your head with suspicions." There it was, the subtle dig at Thomas. "My father's just worried about me," Elena said carefully. "Of course he is, but sometimes worry can turn into paranoia. He never liked me, even before the accident. Did you know that?" Elena played dumb. "Why wouldn't he like you?" Adrien's knife work on the vegetables was precise, almost aggressive. "He ran a background check on me before our wedding. Found some juvenile records I'd had sealed. Made a whole thing about it." "What kind of records?" "Hacking charges from when I was 17. Stupid kid stuff. I broke into my high school's computer system and changed some grades. Got caught, did community service, record sealed. But your father acted like I was a career criminal." Elena watched him chop the vegetables. "He's ex-FBI, that's what they do." "True, but it made me realize something." Adrien looked up at her. "He's never going to accept me, which means eventually you'll have to choose. Him or me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I don't want to choose," Elena said. "You're my husband. He's my father. Why can't I have both?" Adrien's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course you can, sweetheart. I'm just saying, if he keeps pushing these conspiracy theories about me, it might create problems for us." He was testing her, trying to gauge how much influence Thomas had. Elena forced herself to smile. "Let's not talk about that this weekend. I just want to relax and try to remember us." "Now you're talking." Adrien finished preparing the food and started cooking. "Dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. Why don't you go freshen up?" In the bathroom, Elena locked the door and stared at herself in the mirror. She looked tired, pale. The scar from her head injury was still visible at her hairline. She thought about Daniel, her son, 3 days old when he died, because of the man cooking dinner in the next room. Rage flared in her chest, hot and sharp. She wanted to grab a knife from that kitchen and make Adrien pay for what he'd taken from her. Make him feel even a fraction of the pain she carried every day. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was to get him talking, get him confessing, get him locked away forever. She splashed cold water on her face and whispered to the microphone, "I'm okay. He's being careful. Hasn't said anything incriminating yet." Thomas's voice came through the tiny earpiece she'd hidden under her hair. "Take your time. He'll slip. They always do." Dinner was an elaborate performance. Adrien had prepared salmon with roasted vegetables, paired with an expensive white wine. Candles flickered on the table. Classical music played softly in the background. It looked like a romantic evening. It felt like a trap. Adrien kept the conversation light during the meal. He told stories about their early dating days, painting himself as the charming suitor who'd swept her off her feet. Some of the stories had the ring of truth. Others felt manufactured, like he was creating a narrative rather than remembering one. Elena played her part. She laughed at the right moments, asked questions, pretended to be charmed, but she watched his hands, watched the way his eyes calculated every reaction. This man was always thinking 3 moves ahead. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Adrien built a fire and they sat on the leather couch. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls. "Remember when we first came here?" Adrien asked, reaching across to take her hand. "You loved watching the sunset over the water. Said it was the most peaceful place you'd ever been." Elena wished she could remember, but that memory, like so many others from those lost 3 months, was gone. "I wish I could remember that," she said. Adrien's thumb stroked her wrist. His touch made her skin crawl, but she didn't pull away. "Not yet. Maybe I can help trigger the memory." His other hand came up to touch her face. "Sometimes the body remembers what the mind forgets." His touch was gentle, but there was something predatory in his eyes, something that made every survival instinct in Elena had screamed danger. "Adrien, I've been so patient, Elena, so understanding. But we're married. Eventually we need to be a real couple again." She pulled back slightly. "I know. I just need more time." His grip on her wrist tightened, just enough to be uncomfortable. "How much time?" "I don't know. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you're avoiding me." His voice had an edge now, the charming mask slipping. "Like you're afraid of me." "I'm not afraid of you." "Then why do you flinch every time I touch you?" He was leaning closer now. "Why do you lock your door at night? Why won't you even sleep in the same room as your own husband?" "Because I can't remember you." Elena's frustration was real, even if the reasoning was false. How would you feel if you woke up married to a stranger? If someone told you that you loved a person you have no memory of? Adrien stared at her for a long moment. Then he released her wrist and stood up abruptly. "You're right. I'm pushing too hard. I'm sorry." He ran a hand through his hair. "This whole situation has been so stressful. The company's in trouble. You almost died, Daniel." He stopped. His face showed genuine pain for the first time. Elena watched him carefully. Was any of that real? Did he actually feel something about their son's death? "I miss him," Adrien said quietly, "even though I only knew him for 3 days. I held him in my arms and promised him I'd be a good father. And then he was gone." Elena felt tears stinging her eyes. This part was real for her. "I wish I remembered holding him. You were unconscious when he was born. The doctor said it was better that way, less traumatic." Adrien wiped his eyes. "I should have been there more. Should have spent every moment with him. But the company was imploding, and I thought I had time. I thought he'd make it." For a moment, Elena saw a glimpse of something human in Adrien, something that might have actually grieved. Then it was one shuttered behind his eyes like a door slamming shut. "I'm going to bed," he said. "Early night. We can hike around the lake tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it." "That sounds nice." "Good night, Elena." "Good night." She watched him walk to the master bedroom and close the door. Then she waited. Midnight. The cabin was silent except for the crackling fire and the sound of the lake outside. Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to Adrien move around in the master bedroom. Then she heard the front door open and close quietly. She got up and went to the window. Adrien was outside by the lake, phone pressed to his ear. Even from this distance, his body language screamed anger. Pacing back and forth, gesturing sharply. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but she didn't need to. A memory crashed into her brain like a freight train. She was here, in this house, 7 months pregnant, crying, on the phone with someone. I can't do this anymore, Dad. I can't pretend to love him. I can't raise a child with this man. I found the offshore accounts. I found the forged signatures. I have proof, and I'm bringing it to you tomorrow. The memory was so vivid, so real that Elena gasped. She had been here before, in this exact house, and she'd been planning to leave Adrien. No wonder he tried to kill her on that drive. She wasn't just discovering his crimes, she was about to expose them. 2 in the morning. The cabin was dark except for a single lamp in the kitchen. Elena knew she shouldn't do what she was about to do. Knew it was risky, possibly stupid, definitely against every rule Thomas had laid out. But she couldn't stand the not knowing anymore. Couldn't stand being in the dark, playing defense, waiting for Adrien to make his next move. She crept downstairs, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The guest bedroom door clicked shut behind her with a soft sound that seemed deafening in the silence. She paused, listening. Adrien's bedroom door remained closed. She could hear him snoring softly through the thin walls. Good. He was asleep. The kitchen was bathed in pale moonlight streaming through the windows. Adrien's laptop sat on the counter, still open. He'd been working on it before he went outside to make his angry phone call. Elena approached it like it might explode. Her hands were shaking. This was insane. If he caught her, everything would be blown. The whole operation, months of planning, her father's careful strategy. But that memory from earlier tonight had awakened something in her. Not just fear, rage. She'd been here before, in this prison disguised as a paradise, and she'd found evidence then. She could find it again. The laptop screen glowed to life when she touched the trackpad. Adrien hadn't bothered to lock it. Why would he? They were alone, miles from anywhere, and he thought she was a helpless victim with brain damage. His arrogance would be his downfall. The email application was open. Elena's detective training took over. She quickly scanned the inbox, looking for anything incriminating. Most of it was business correspondence, board meetings, financial reports, press releases about Elena's tragic accident that painted Adrien as the grieving husband. Then she found it, an email thread with the subject line, "Estate Transfer Timeline." Her heart started pounding so hard she thought Adrien might hear it from the bedroom. She clicked on it. The most recent email was dated November 1st, just days after she'd woken from her coma. From the legal team at Neuralink to Adrien's personal email. Dear Mr. Cross, following up on our phone conversation regarding the estate transfer process. Once death certificate is issued or permanent incapacity is legally declared, the trust fund transfer will initiate immediately under the terms of your prenuptial agreement and New York estate law. An estimated timeline for final disbursement is 4 to 6 weeks, assuming no legal challenges from other family members. Our recommendation, accelerate medical evaluation toward incompetency ruling if patient shows no signs of functional recovery by end of Q4. This would allow you to assume control of assets while avoiding the more complicated probate process that a death certificate would trigger. Please advise on how you would like to proceed. Elena read it 3 times, making sure she understood what she was seeing. They were giving him a roadmap to steal her inheritance, not even trying to hide it behind legal jargon. Just straight-up instructions on how to have her declared incompetent so he could take her money. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. She angled the screen, trying to avoid glare, and took a photo. The camera made a soft clicking sound. In the silent cabin, it sounded like a gunshot. Elena froze, listening. Nothing. Adrien's snoring continued unchanged. She took 3 more photos of different emails in the thread, showing the progression of Adrien's plans. Then she carefully closed the laptop screen to exactly the angle it had been before. She turned to leave, to creep back upstairs before, "Find what you were looking for?" Adrien's voice came from directly behind her. Elena's blood turned to ice. She spun around. He was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, wearing only pajama pants, arms crossed, face expressionless. How long had he been standing there? She hadn't heard him approach. "I was getting water," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The sink is that way." He gestured to the opposite side of the kitchen. "The laptop is over here." I was looking at the time. My phone died. Your phone is in your hand, with the camera app open. Elena's mind raced. Lie? Run? Fight? Adrien stepped into the kitchen, moving slowly, deliberately, like a predator approaching wounded prey. When did you start remembering? His voice was calm, almost conversational. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Elena. He moved closer. I can see it in your eyes. The confusion is gone, you remember? How much? She backed up until she hit the counter. Adrien, you're scaring me. Good. Another step closer. You should be scared, because you've been playing me this whole time, haven't you? You and your father. The amnesia was an act. It wasn't an act. The helpless victim routine, the innocent questions, the locked doors and separate bedrooms. All of it was theater while you and Thomas gathered evidence. His voice was getting louder now, the calm facade cracking. He put you up to this, fed you his paranoid conspiracy theories about me being some kind of criminal mastermind, turned my own wife into a spy against me. He didn't have to feed me anything. Elena's fear was transforming into anger. I heard you on the phone tonight, talking about making a problem go away, about arranging another accident. You were talking about me. Adrien smiled, but there was no humor in it. Eavesdropping. How very detective of you. Tell me, Elena, did you record that conversation? Is Daddy listening right now? He looked directly at her necklace. Elena's hand flew to it instinctively, and that was all the confirmation Adrien needed. You're wired. His laugh was bitter. Of course you are. This whole weekend was a setup. Get me isolated. Get me talking. Get me on tape confessing to crimes I didn't commit. You did commit them. Elena was done pretending. Did you cause my accident? Beat. Adrien's smile widened. What do you think? I think you remotely hijacked my Tesla. I think you tried to murder me for my trust fund. And I think you killed Rebecca Ford the same way you tried to kill me. Rebecca. Adrien's expression shifted to something almost nostalgic. Rebecca was easy, stupid and trusting. She actually believed I loved her. Never questioned why I was so interested in her insurance policies. Never wondered why I pushed her to increase her coverage to $8 million. He was confessing, actually confessing. The microphone was catching every word. Elena kept him talking. You burned down her house. I hired someone to burn down her house. Important distinction. I was in Tokyo on business when it happened. Perfect alibi. And the fire marshal ruled it an accident after I made a generous donation to the department. And me? Did you hire someone for me too? Adrien's smile faded. You were supposed to be different. Smarter than Rebecca, sure, but I thought that intelligence would make you more compatible with me. I thought we could actually build something together. His voice turned bitter. But then you had to start asking questions. Had to dig into the financials. Had to find the forged signatures and the offshore accounts. You couldn't just trust your husband, could you? Had to play detective. You were stealing from me. I was saving my company. Do you have any idea what it's like to build something from nothing? To pour your entire life into a vision, only to watch it crumble because of bad luck and bad timing? I needed capital. You had capital. We were married. It should have been simple. So you forged my signature, drained my accounts, and when I found out, you tried to kill me. Adrien's eyes went cold. You didn't leave me a choice. You called your father that night. I knew what that meant. You were going to expose me, destroy everything I'd built. So yes, I made arrangements for your car to malfunction. An accident. Tragic but understandable. Pregnant woman driving too fast in bad weather. And Daniel? Elena's voice broke, saying his name. Your son? For just a second, something flickered across Adrien's face. Regret? Guilt? Then it was gone. I didn't want children, Elena. I told you that before we got married, but you insisted. Said it would strengthen our bond. But all that baby did was complicate things. He stepped closer and Elena could smell the wine on his breath mixed with something else. Rage. That thing was just collateral damage, Adrien said. An unfortunate casualty of your stubborn refusal to die quietly. In the surveillance van half a mile away, Thomas was on his feet, weapon drawn, already moving toward the door. He just confessed to everything, Kate said, calling the state troopers. Go. Go now. Jake was right behind them. I'm coming too. They ran into the darkness toward the lake house, Thomas's heart pounding with one thought. Hold on, Ellie. I'm coming back in the cabin. Elena made her decision. She was done being afraid, done being a victim. She ran for the front door. Locked. The deadbolt required a key. Adrien moved to block her path to the rest of the house. Where do you think you're going? Away from you. So you can run to Daddy? Tell the police everything I just said? Ruin my life. He was advancing on her now. I don't think so. Elena remembered her training, years of NYPD defensive tactics. She might be recovering from a brain injury, but she was still a cop. When Adrien lunged, she sidestepped, grabbed his arm, used his momentum against him. He crashed into the door but recovered quickly, faster than she'd expected. They grappled in the entryway. Elena kneed him in the stomach, but he caught her leg and shoved her backward. She stumbled, hit the wall hard. You always were a fighter, Adrien said. I actually like that about you. But it's over, Elena. Accept it. She ran for the kitchen. Maybe she could find those keys, unlock a window. But Adrien was right behind her. He grabbed her by the hair, yanked her back. Elena screamed and drove her elbow backward into his ribs. Heard something crack. He grunted in pain but didn't let go. They crashed through the kitchen, breaking dishes. Elena grabbed a cast-iron skillet from the stove and swung, connected with his shoulder. He stumbled. She ran for the back door. Also locked. Windows locked. She was trapped. Adrien recovered and charged at her like a linebacker. They went through the coffee table, glass shattering. Elena's hand found a shard of broken glass. She slashed at him, drew blood across his arm. He howled and backhanded her across the face. Her vision went white with pain. You bitch! He was on top of her now, hands around her throat. You were supposed to stay asleep. Why couldn't you just stay unconscious? Why couldn't you just die? His grip tightened. Elena couldn't breathe. Her vision started to darken at the edges. Her hands scrabbled at his wrists, trying to pry them off. But he was too strong and she was too weak. This is it, she thought. This is how I die. Just like he planned. She thought of Daniel, of her father, of all the women at her foundation who would never get the help they needed because she'd failed. No, she wasn't going to fail. With the last of her strength, Elena drove her thumb into Adrien's eye. He screamed and loosened his grip just enough for her to get a breath. Just enough for her to bring her knee up hard into his groin. He rolled off her, gasping. Elena tried to crawl away, coughing, vision swimming. Then she heard the most beautiful sound in the world. The front door exploding inward. Wood splintering. Federal agent, step away from her. Thomas stood in the doorway, weapon drawn, Kate right behind him. Adrien released Elena completely. She collapsed on the floor, gasping for air. Adrien got to his feet slowly, hands up, and incredibly, he was smiling. Tom, thank God you're here. She attacked me. Her brain injury, she's not herself. She's having some kind of psychotic episode. I heard everything, Thomas said, his voice deadly calm. Every word. Adrien's smile faltered. You're bluffing. She's been wired for audio and video this entire trip. Everything you just said is recorded and already uploaded to FBI servers. Your confession about Rebecca, about the Tesla, about Daniel. Adrien's face went white. That's entrapment, illegal surveillance. You can't use any of that in court. Kate stepped forward. One-party consent state, Mr. Cross. Your wife gave permission to record on any conversation in which she was a participant. It's completely legal and completely damning. Two state troopers entered behind them, weapons drawn. Adrien Cross, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Elena Hart, the murder of Rebecca Ford, and the murder of Daniel Hart. Adrien's laugh turned manic. This is insane. I'm a billionaire. I have the best lawyers money can buy. I'll be out on bail in 48 hours, and this whole farce will be dismissed. You think you can destroy me? I built an empire. I'm untouchable. Elena stood up, leaning heavily on Kate for support. Her throat was bruised where Adrien had choked her. But her voice was steady. No, you're not. She held up her phone, showing him the photos she'd taken of his emails. Intent to defraud, intent to declare me incompetent, intent to steal my inheritance. Combined with the Tesla remote access logs Jake recovered, Rebecca's arsonist's testimony, and the recording we just made, you're finished. Adrien stared at the phone, then at Elena, and reality finally crashed down on him. This was all a setup, he whispered. Thomas's voice was quiet but filled with steel. You killed my grandson. You tried to kill my daughter. Did you really think I'd let you get away with it? The troopers moved in with handcuffs. As they cuffed him, Adrien's composure finally shattered completely. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I'll bury all of you. I'll destroy your careers, your lives, everything. My lawyers will find out about Vanessa Lee, Elena said. Your mistress. The affair you were having while I was pregnant with your son. The woman you told that I'd die in an accident so you two could be together. That'll play really well in court. Adrien's eyes went wide. He didn't know they knew about Vanessa. You can't. We already did, Kate said. She's been interviewed. She's cooperating. Gave us everything. Adrien lunged at Elena, screaming incoherently, but the troopers held him back. This isn't over, he shouted as they dragged him toward the door. You haven't won. I'll get out. I'll make you pay for this. Thomas stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Their faces were inches apart. You already made her pay, Thomas said quietly. You took her son, her health, her memories, her sense of safety. But you didn't take her life, and that was your biggest mistake. They dragged Adrien out into the night, his screams echoing across the lake. Silence fell over the cabin. Elena stood there swaying, adrenaline finally wearing off. Everything hurt. Her throat, her head, her ribs where she'd hit the table. Then her legs gave out. Thomas caught her before she hit the ground. I've got you, baby girl. I've got you. Elena collapsed into her father's arms and finally let herself break down. Great racking sobs that hurt her bruised throat. Tears that had been held back for months. Is it really over? She managed to choke out. It's over, Thomas said. He's going to prison for the rest of his life. Daniel. I know, sweetheart. They held each other as red and blue lights flashed through the windows, as paramedics arrived to check Elena's injuries. As crime scene techs began documenting everything, it was over. The monster was caught. Justice was coming. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the federal courthouse in Manhattan, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Outside, the media circus was in full swing. News vans lined the street. Satellites extended toward the sky. Reporters spoke urgently into cameras, their words creating a constant low hum that penetrated even the thick courthouse walls. We're here at the trial of tech billionaire Adrien Cross, accused of murdering his first wife, Rebecca Ford, and attempting to murder his second wife, Elena Hart. The case has gripped the nation for months, with new revelations emerging almost daily. Inside, courtroom 8B was packed to capacity, every seat filled. Standing room only at the back. The gallery buzzed with whispered conversations until the bailiff called for order. All rise, the Honorable Judge Patricia Brennan presiding. Elena sat at the prosecution's table, flanked by 2 assistant district attorneys. She wore a navy suit that Thomas had helped her pick out. Professional, composed. The bruises on her neck had long since faded, but she still sometimes caught herself touching the spot where Adrien's hands had been. Across the aisle, Adrien sat with his defense team. 3 lawyers in expensive suits, all carrying leather briefcases that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But Adrien himself looked different. The orange jumpsuit was a far cry from his designer suits. His hair, once perfectly styled, was growing out unevenly. His face had the pallor of someone who hadn't seen real sunlight in months. He looked smaller somehow, less intimidating. Just a man facing the consequences of his actions. When the judge settled into her seat, she looked out over the courtroom with stern eyes. This trial concerns serious allegations. 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. The prosecution has the burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense will have every opportunity to present their case. I expect professionalism from all parties. This is not a media circus, regardless of what's happening outside my courthouse. The lead prosecutor, Martin Hayes, stood for his opening statement. He was a veteran of the DA's office with over 100 successful prosecutions under his belt. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, over the next several weeks, you're going to hear a story that seems almost impossible to believe. A story about a man who murdered his first wife for her insurance money, who then married another woman and tried to do the same thing. A man who was willing to kill his own infant son, collateral damage in his quest for money and power. He walks slowly along the jury box, making eye contact with each person. This is not a case built on speculation or circumstantial evidence. We have digital forensics showing that the defendant remotely disabled his wife's vehicle, causing it to crash at over 90 miles per hour. We have testimony from the arsonist he hired to kill his first wife. We have recorded confessions, caught on audio and video. And we have the defendant's own words, spoken in what he thought was safety, admitting to all of it. Martin paused, letting that sink in. Adrien Cross is not the brilliant businessman the media portrayed him to be. He's a con artist, a fraudster, and a killer. And by the end of this trial, you will have no doubt that he deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. The defense attorney, Marcus Sterling, gave his opening next. He was smooth, polished, and expensive. The kind of lawyer who specialized in getting wealthy clients acquitted. Members of the jury, the prosecution wants you to believe that my client is a mastermind criminal. But the evidence will show something very different. Elena Hart suffered a traumatic brain injury. Her memories of the months preceding the accident are gone. Into that void, her father, a former FBI agent, inserted a narrative. A story of murder and conspiracy that fit his pre-existing bias against my client. Marcus gestured toward Elena. Mrs. Hart has been through tremendous trauma, and no one questions that. But trauma can make people vulnerable to suggestion. Her father, Thomas Hart, conducted an illegal surveillance operation against my client. He planted false evidence. He manipulated his own daughter into wearing a wire. And when that didn't produce the confession he wanted, he orchestrated a scenario designed to make my client appear guilty. He walked back to his table, picking up a document. The so-called confession you'll hear was obtained under duress. Adrien Cross was defending himself from a violent attack by a woman suffering from PTSD and brain damage. His words were taken out of context, twisted to fit a predetermined narrative. Marcus looked at the jury seriously. Adrien Cross is not perfect. His company was failing. His marriage was troubled. But those things don't make him a murderer. At the end of this trial, I'm confident you'll find him not guilty of these outrageous charges. The prosecution's case unfolded methodically over the next 3 weeks, witness after witness, exhibit after exhibit, a mountain of evidence that seemed to grow larger each day. Elena took the stand on day 5. The courtroom fell silent as she was sworn in. Martin Hayes approached with a gentle expression. He knew this would be hard for her. Mrs. Hart, can you please tell the jury what happened on the night of November 8th? Elena took a breath, steadying herself. I was driving to my father's house in Connecticut. I had discovered evidence that my husband had forged my signature on loan documents and drained my personal bank accounts. I had printed out bank statements and financial records, and I was bringing them to my father. What happened during the drive? My car's dashboard started glitching. Then my phone powered off completely. I couldn't call for help. Then the accelerator slammed down on its own. My foot wasn't on the pedal. The car was accelerating by itself. Her voice remained steady, but her hands gripped the armrests of the witness chair. I tried to brake. The pedal went to the floor. Nothing happened. I tried to steer. The wheel was locked. I couldn't control anything. The car just kept accelerating. 60, 70, 80 miles per hour. I saw the barrier ahead, and I knew I was going to crash. I tried to cover my stomach to protect my baby, and then impact. Several jurors were visibly moved. One woman was wiping her eyes. You were 7 months pregnant at the time? Yes, they performed an emergency C-section. My son, Daniel, survived initially, but he was too premature. He died 3 days later. I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Hart. Martin paused respectfully. Can you tell the jury about your memory loss? I have retrograde amnesia. I lost the 3 months before the accident. I don't remember being pregnant. I don't remember the problems in my marriage. I don't remember discovering the fraud. My father had to tell me all of it after I woke up. How did you feel when you learned what your husband had done? Elena looked directly at Adrien. He refused to meet her eyes. Betrayed, angry, terrified, but also determined to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. The cross-examination was brutal. Marcus Sterling did his best to discredit her testimony, suggesting her memories were implanted, her evidence was fabricated, her entire story was her father's invention. But Elena held firm. She'd been a detective for years. She knew how to testify under pressure. Mrs. Hart, isn't it true that you can't actually remember any of the fraud you claim your husband committed? That's correct. I don't remember discovering it. But the financial records don't lie. The forged signatures exist. The drained accounts exist. My memory loss doesn't change those facts. And isn't it true that your father had a pre-existing bias against my client? My father ran a background check before my wedding. That's standard procedure for an FBI agent, but he didn't forbid the marriage. He didn't interfere. He was suspicious, yes, and it turns out he was right to be. You wore a wire to the lakehouse, correct? Yes. At your father's instruction? At my own decision. My father was building a case. I volunteered to help. So you intentionally set out to entrap my client? Elena's eyes flashed. I set out to document the truth. Your client confessed freely. No one forced him to admit what he'd done. Jake Morrison testified about the Tesla data, explaining in clear terms how the remote access worked. The command to disable vehicle controls was sent from an authenticated account requiring CEO-level credentials. Biometric verification. Security token. The digital trail leads directly to Adrien Cross's personal login. Is there any possibility someone else could have sent that command? It's theoretically possible. The same way it's theoretically possible to win the lottery 5 times in a row. But the probability is infinitesimally small. This was Adrien Cross's account, authenticated with his fingerprint from his physical security token. The defense tried to argue that the data could have been manipulated, but Jake shut that down quickly. Tesla's servers are cloud-based with redundant backups across multiple locations. To alter this data, you'd need to simultaneously hack into dozens of secure servers across different time zones. It's not just unlikely, it's impossible. Leonard Lenny Kowalski took the stand in his prison orange jumpsuit, shackled at the ankles. He was 48 years old, serving 15 years for arson and robbery. He looked like a broken man. Mr. Kowalski, did you know Adrien Cross in 2019? Yeah, he hired me to do a job. What kind of job? Lenny looked down at his hands. He paid me $15,000 to burn down a house, Rebecca Ford's house. Told me she was out of town, that it was an insurance thing. He needed it to look like an electrical fire. Did you burn down Rebecca Ford's house? Yes, his voice cracked. And she wasn't out of town. She was asleep upstairs. By the time I realized the fire was too big. I couldn't get to her. She died because of what I did. Several jurors looked horrified. Mr. Kowalski, why are you testifying today? Because I've carried this guilt for 5 years. When I heard he tried to kill another wife, I knew I had to speak up. I took a deal for a reduced sentence, yeah. But mainly I'm here because Rebecca Ford deserves justice, and because maybe I can stop him from killing anyone else. Do you have evidence of Adrien Cross hiring you? Yeah, I kept everything. Text messages from a burner phone he bought. Payment records showing the $15,000 deposited in my account. I've been waiting for this day. The defense tried to paint Lenny as a liar, trying to reduce his sentence, but the physical evidence backed up every word he said. Vanessa Lee was called to testify. She walked to the stand in a designer suit, heels clicking on the marble floor. She looked terrified. Miss Lee, what was your relationship with the defendant? Vanessa's voice was barely above a whisper. We were involved, romantically. While he was married to Elena Hart? Yes. For how long? About 8 months. Did Mr. Cross ever discuss his wife's trust fund with you? Vanessa looked at Adrien, then away. Yes, he said once she died, we could be together, that her money would save his company and we'd start fresh. Gasps from the gallery. The judge banged her gavel for silence. Did he specify how Elena would die? He said accidents happen, that sometimes life insurance is there for a reason. I didn't understand what he meant at first. Then when Elena crashed, I started to wonder. Did you confront him about this? Yes, after Elena survived and woke from her coma. I asked what his plan was. He said her memory loss was almost better than death because she couldn't testify about what she didn't remember. What else did he say? Vanessa's voice dropped even lower. He said if the memories came back, accidents sometimes happen twice. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Miss Lee, why are you testifying today? Because I realized I was in love with a monster, and because Adrien made it clear that if I became a problem, I'd be his next accident. The defense put Adrien on the stand, which proved to be a catastrophic mistake. He started strong, denying everything, playing the grieving husband, the innocent businessman being railroaded by an overzealous former FBI agent. But Martin Hayes destroyed him on cross-examination. Mr. Cross, you stated that you loved your wife. Is that correct? Yes. Then why did you email your legal team asking about declaring her incompetent? I was exploring all options for her care. Care, let me read from this email. Accelerate medical evaluation toward incompetency ruling. This would allow control of assets. That's not about care, is it? You're taking it out of context. What about this text to Vanessa Lee? Sometimes accidents happen twice. What did you mean by that? I was speaking hypothetically. Were you speaking hypothetically when you told Vanessa that your wife would die and you'd be together? I never said that. Martin played the recording, Vanessa's voice, then Adrien's. What's the plan, Adrien? Wait another 5 years, like with Rebecca? I'll handle it, but you need to be patient. Like you handled the car accident? She survived. Barely, and with permanent memory loss. That's almost better than dead. She can't testify to what she doesn't remember. Adrien's face went white. Martin continued. Mr. Cross, at the lakehouse, you confessed to killing Rebecca Ford, to causing Elena's accident, and to viewing your infant son as collateral damage. Do you deny saying those words? That recording was obtained illegally. Answer the question. Did you say those words? She attacked me. I was defending myself, and she was confused, and I said things in the heat of the moment. So you did say them. You're twisting everything. Martin's voice rose. Did you or did you not hire someone to burn down Rebecca Ford's house? No. Did you or did you not remotely disable Elena Hart's vehicle? No. Did you or did you not tell Elena that your son was collateral damage? She's lying. They're all lying. Adrien was shouting now, his composure completely gone. Martin walked back to his table and picked up a document. Mr. Cross, why did you tell your lawyer that once she's gone, the trust fund transfers immediately? I was just asking questions. You were planning her death. Admit it. No. You killed Rebecca Ford for $8 million. You tried to kill Elena Hart for $50 million. You're a murderer motivated by greed. I'm not a murderer. Elena ruined everything. She was supposed to stay asleep. She was supposed to die quietly, and none of this would have happened. The courtroom fell silent. Adrien realized what he'd just said. His lawyer dropped his head into his hands. He'd confessed, again, on the witness stand, in front of a jury. It was over. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, every face was grim. On the charge of first-degree murder of Rebecca Ford, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of first-degree murder of Daniel Hart, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of attempted murder of Elena Hart, how do you find? Guilty. Adrien sat motionless as the verdicts were read. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Brennan looked down at Adrien with cold eyes. Mr. Cross, you are a man who believed your wealth and intelligence placed you above the law and above basic human decency. You murdered one wife for her money. You tried to murder another for the same reason. And in the process, you killed your own infant son. She paused, letting the words sink in. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole on each count, to be served consecutively. You will never walk free again." As the marshals led Adrien away, he looked back at Elena one final time. She met his gaze steadily, didn't flinch, didn't look away. He was nothing to her now, just a cautionary tale about trusting the wrong person. The courtroom emptied slowly. Elena stood with Thomas and Kate, feeling lighter than she had in months. "It's really over," she said. Thomas put his arm around her. "It's really over. He'll die in prison." "And you," Kate said, "get to live. That's the best revenge there is." Elena nodded, looking out the courthouse windows at the bright autumn day beyond. She was free. Brian was caged. Justice had been served. Now the hard work of healing would truly begin. 3 months after the trial, and Elena and Thomas stood together at the cemetery. A small white headstone read, "Daniel Thomas Hart, too beautiful for earth, forever in our hearts." Elena held flowers in her hand. "I dream about him sometimes. What he'd look like, his laugh. He had your eyes in those 3 days. I hate that I don't remember holding him." Thomas pulled out his phone. "I took videos for when you were ready." He showed her tiny Daniel in the NICU. Thomas holding him, whispering, "Your mama's a fighter. She's going to wake up, and she's going to love you so much." Elena wept watching it. "Thank you for being there when I couldn't. Always." They placed flowers on the grave. "I'm doing something with the trust fund, creating a foundation in Daniel's name for children who lost parents to domestic violence. Give them safety, therapy, legal support." "That's beautiful, sweetheart." "And I'm going back to work. Kate and I are opening a security firm together. Morrison Hart Investigations. Are you sure you're ready?" "No, but I can't keep being a victim. Daniel deserved a mother who fought. This is how I fight now." In her therapy session with Dr. Rivera, Elena was making progress. "How are you managing the PTSD?" "Better. The nightmares are less frequent. I don't panic every time I see a Tesla anymore." "And the guilt about Daniel?" Elena's tears came. "That's harder. I know logically it wasn't my fault, but I carried him. I was supposed to protect him. You did everything you could. Adrien's actions aren't yours to carry." "I know, doesn't make it easier. Grief doesn't follow logic. But you're here, you survived, and you're building something meaningful from the pain. That matters. Sometimes I feel guilty for moving forward, like I'm leaving Daniel behind. Moving forward isn't leaving him behind. It's honoring him by living the life he didn't get to." Elena nodded, considering this wisdom. 1 year later, the Daniel Hart Foundation held its grand opening. The space was bright and welcoming. Elena cut the ribbon with Kate beside her, Thomas watching with quiet pride. Press and community members gathered. Elena spoke at the podium. "My son Daniel lived for 3 days, but in that short time, he taught me about resilience, about fighting when everything seems impossible. This foundation exists to give children who've lost parents to violence the safety and support Daniel never needed, because I'm still here to fight for them." Applause filled the room. Inside the foundation, children participated in art therapy, mothers sat in legal consultations. Safe housing was being arranged. Elena personally met with families, giving them hope. Kate approached. "We've placed 23 children with the safe families in 3 months. Let's double that by year end." Elena's new life was taking shape. She taught self-defense classes to domestic violence survivors. Thomas consulted with Morrison Hart Investigations. Elena went on a date with Rachel, a fellow detective. Gentle, patient, understanding. "You sure you're ready for this?" Rachel asked. "For dinner? Or for dating?" "Both," Elena smiled. "I'm ready to try." Late one afternoon, Elena returned to the cemetery alone. She placed fresh flowers and sat on the bench Thomas had installed. A plaque read, "In memory of Daniel Hart and all children lost to violence. May we fight so others don't have to." Elena spoke to the grave. "I met with a mother yesterday. Her husband tried to kill her, just like Adrien did to me. But she got out. We helped her. She and her kids are safe now." She paused. "I wish you were here, baby. I wish I could have been the mother you deserved. But I promise every child we save, That's me being your mother. That's me protecting them the way I couldn't protect you. She touched the headstone gently. Adrien's in prison. He'll never hurt anyone again. And I'm okay. Finally. It took a long time, but I'm okay. Thomas appeared, carrying 2 coffees. Thought you might be here. Am I that predictable? Thomas sat beside Omer. You visit every Sunday, like clockwork. They sat in comfortable silence. You know he'd be proud of you, what you've built. You think so? I know so. You turned tragedy into purpose. That's the greatest honor you could give him. Elena leaned on her father's shoulder. Thank you, Dad, for never giving up, for fighting when I couldn't. That's what fathers do. They watched the sunset together. The camera pulled back from Elena and Thomas at the grave. In the distance, the foundation building was visible. Lights on. People inside. Elena's voice came as a whisper carried on the wind. Adrien thought burying me would be the end of his problems. But sometimes what you bury doesn't stay dead. Sometimes it comes back stronger. Far away in a federal prison, Adrien sat in solitary confinement. A guard delivered mail, 1 envelope. Adrien opened it, a single photo inside. The Daniel Hart Foundation opening day. Elena smiling, surrounded by children and families she'd helped. On the back, in Elena's handwriting, you took my son, I took your legacy. Every child we save is a life you didn't destroy. That's my revenge, outliving you in every way that matters. Elena. Adrien crumpled the photo, but the camera held on it as it lay on the floor. Elena's smile surrounded by light and hope. The screen faded to black. White text appeared. In the United States, intimate partner violence accounts for 20% of all violent crime against women. If you or someone you know needs help, National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-79-97233. This story is dedicated to Daniel and all the children who deserve better, and to the fathers who never stop fighting for their daughters.